Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace, blessings, and mercy of God be upon you. This is a new briefing from www.central-mosque.com about coronavirus, what's going on in Saudi Arabia, Russia, and how this entire thing is just a big, hot mess. So when it comes to coronavirus, the medical side of the emergency, there are a lot of experts who are thinking that basically it is going to get quite bad in the United States for a number of reasons. One is because of the lack of public health capability of the United States compared to European Union and some other countries. So if you live in Europe or if you live in the United Kingdom, the NHS or other socialist healthcare systems have a very, very good public health awareness system, and the way to deal with the United States, first of all, to begin with, does not have that capability. Secondly, if we look at what's happened, so let's look at the timeline. So on the 31st of December 2019 was the first time some cases, potential cases, were discovered in the United States with certain people traveling from China. The game changer came on the 28th of February 2020 when the first patient in the United States of coronavirus was detected who had no history of traveling. So what that means is the virus at this time is within America without any history of anybody traveling to or from China. Another thing that's happened in America is the testing has been largely insufficient. They haven't been able to concentrate on it. They haven't been able to test enough people. And when they decided to test people, some of the kits were not compatible. The results couldn't be interpreted properly, and the testing regimen was delayed to a large extent. So, therefore, a lot of experts are predicting that, as far as America is concerned, there's going to be a large spike in the cases of coronavirus. And what's happened in the last 24 to 48 hours is Ted Cruz, which is one of the senators, he's come across. There was a conference in America, conservative conference, and basically he was in touch with some of the people who have now been suspected of being infected with coronavirus. So he's a senator in America, and he has self-isolated itself. So in America, and I hope it does not happen. My prayers are with everybody concerned. However, there are genuine concerns of this thing spiking in the United States simply because their public health system is a mess, their management of the disease is a mess, and let's hope that they get a handle on this entire situation. When it comes to United Kingdom, specifically, there are four phases of how they deal with outbreaks and things like that. So right now, the United States is in the United Kingdom rather is in the contained phase. So what they do is they identify patients and they basically build a profile. You know, did this person travel anywhere? Who were they getting in touch with, and so on and so forth. And they try to contain and isolate the disease as much as they can. By the way, there's a phase which is called research, and that obviously starts from day one and carries on in the background. I mean, if the outbreak gets severe, then more money is pumped into it, and so on and so forth. So the research has been ongoing. However, we are officially in the contain stage at this time. There is news in the media that the government is going to switch to a delay stage. Whether that happens today or in the next 24 to 48 hours, it is a very big possibility that at some point the government's going to switch to delay. So what delay means is the admission from public health officials that, look, we have been unable to contain this virus. So what we need to do is we need to delay the impact a few months further so the research catches up. So in the delay phase, what happens is, as you know, what's happening in Italy right now, public gatherings, of a certain number, they say, people over a few hundred or people over 1,000 are not allowed to gather. Schools are shut down, and so on and so forth. So this is basically delay. The government realizes, look, we cannot contain this anymore. So what we need to do is we need to delay the impact of this virus as much as possible, push the window, push it beyond summer, because as you know, summer people go on holidays, a lot of events happen, a lot of gatherings happen. So let's push it out in the autumn, so by the time research and everybody else has caught up. The last stage is mitigate. So this basically means that containment has failed, delay has failed, and now we're switching to saving as many lives as possible. So this is basically a full-blown emergency. And in this stage, what happens? The councils, the government, the hospitals, they revive their business continuity plans. A lot of retired doctors, nurses, medical staff are brought back as an emergency. And so basically, this is about everything else has failed. We're just going to try to save as many lives as possible, and I seriously hope we don't get there. However, even if we don't switch to the delay phase now, um, there's possibility that at some point United Kingdom will go into a delay phase, which means the schools will shut down and so on and so forth. As far as Muslims are concerned, that delay phase, when the government Cobra meeting says that, that's when you need to start to begin to worry about Muslims and the mosque. Ramadan is coming up, so there'll be a lot of people. Of course, right now there's no Ramadan, so we have, many mosques have hundreds or maybe even thousand or so people for Friday prayers. If Ramadan kicks on, then you're going to have iftar, people sitting together, and opening the fast. Also tarawih, qiyam al-layl, so on and so forth. So the mosques need to start thinking on how they're going to deal with this if the government switches from the contain phase to the delay phase. So we will talk about it if that happens, inshallah. So why is this virus having such a big impact on the world economy? Very simple reasons. There are many reasons. I've just highlighted two to just make it simpler for you to understand. In 2019, China imported over 2.1 trillion dollars worth of finished products worldwide. Also, China is the world's biggest producer of manufactured components. So what happens is when you're producing something, whether it's a car or whether it's any other system, the world supply lines are called just in time. So basically what happens is, in the old days, what used to happen, spare parts used to clog up warehouses and storage facilities and so on. That's not how manufacturing works these days. What happens is just in time means that you order the part and it gets to you right when you need it. So you're not stocking it, you're not putting it in a warehouse anywhere. So if Chinese cities and their some of their trade facilities, their factories are in lockdown, that it impacts the world economy because the fully manufactured products are not coming in or are delayed. But most importantly, this is the biggest problem: is components are not coming in, which factories and other areas need to manufacture products. So that's why the world economy is taking a huge hit. And remember that it isn't the risk. You can deal with the risk. So if you can quantify the risk, if you know what a risk is, you can put measures in place to mitigate those risks. Is the uncertainty. So right now, the world has no idea when this thing is going to end, when China is going to allow free movements into some of these areas which have been affected by virus. So it's the uncertainty which is affecting the world economy at this time. Moving forward, Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia since 1926 has a history of being opportunistic. There isn't a single opportunity the Saudis can see which they don't take advantage of. So while the world is busy talking about coronavirus, Saudi Arabia has done a few things. They have basically closed down Umrah. They have closed down Tawaf, which is now open last few days ago. So the Muslims and the world is entirely focused on the efforts about coronavirus. Some are medically valid, some are good, and some are just completely make no sense. However, the world is talking about it. Wow, I mean BBC front page news: pilgrims stop. So whether you're a Muslim or not, you tend to take notice. Entire world is focused on it. They're focused on coronavirus, its impact, and what Saudi Arabia is doing. In the background, what MBS has been doing is carrying out a complete purge. So King Salman, he is basically the king of Saudi Arabia. His real brother, and there's only one brother of his, is Ahmed bin Abdulaziz Al Saud. This guy right here. So while the world is worried about coronavirus and everything else, MBS is going in the background and he's purging anyone who has any viability to compete with him in taking over the reins of Saudi Arabia. So as of this morning, he has basically put this guy in detention along with four other ones who are very powerful in the Sudairi tribe and so on and so forth. The world, so although it is news, but it isn't front page news. Why? Because the world economy is tanking and other things which I'm going to talk about in a moment. So keep an eye on it. MBS has seen an opportunity and he's moved straight in, just like what Saudi Arabia has been doing since 1926. Any world crisis, anything, Saudi Arabia basically goes ahead and does whatever it has to do because the world is not looking in this direction. If there was no coronavirus, if there was no impact on the world economy and so on and so forth, we will be talking about this right now, but we're not. Now, the second thing is you've got to understand how the world oil supply works. So traditionally, uh, and let's take the example of United States. So United States was absolutely dependent on the Middle Eastern oil for its economy, for its growth, for its industry, for its car, for its domestic markets, and so on and so forth. So there is some analysis that it costs Saudi Arabia, between $10 and $20 a barrel, by the time they dig the oil, refine it, and they're ready to ship it. Now, because America was so dependent on Middle Eastern oil, towards the end of 1980s, beginning of 1990s, the US government and the think tanks decided that we need to move away from this dependence on Middle Eastern oil. And what they found is they found shale oil. Basically, shale oil is the one that, it's underneath the earth, and what you do is you pump pressurized water and other liquids and air, and you take this oil out. So large parts of America over the last 20 to 25 years have perfected the technology of taking out shale oil. However, so America is now not only not dependent on Middle Eastern oil, America has actually become an exporter of oil. However, there's a problem. The cost of shale oil in America is about $60 a barrel. Cheaply about 45, but average between 55 and $60 a barrel. So looking at this price, it makes no sense. If people can buy oil at $10 a barrel, why would they buy it at $60 a barrel? It makes no sense. So it's in America's interest to keep the price of oil 60 to so above 60 to $70 a barrel. So what that then does is the American indigenously dug up shale oil. It becomes profitable. American companies profit from it, and America is no longer dependent on the Middle East. Now, that is a big blow to oil producing countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia in particular, because America is moving away and America is exporting this shale oil. So what they wanted to do is they want to hurt this American shale oil industry at every cost. So because the economies of Saudi Arabia and Russia to a large extent depends on this oil. So what the Saudis tried to do, they saw this opportunity. So this first oil was used as a weapon last time in 2014. So what happens is the OPEC producing countries, this is countries, conglomeration of countries would produce oil, and what they did is they artificially tried to set the price of oil lower than the shale oil. So, and they did that in 2014. They took massive losses. Okay, but it came a time where they couldn't do this anymore. I mean, some of the American companies went bankrupt, but largely the American shale oil industry survived. So they had no choice but to come back to the normal prices of oil. They caused a little bit of pain, but not a lot of hurt. But what these OPEC countries saw last week, America has cut the interest rate. The American economy is being impacted by coronavirus. They saw an opportunity, and what they wanted to do is they wanted to bring down the price of oil to hurt the American shale oil. Um, and at this point, America and Russia, maybe they don't see eye to eye in many things, but when it comes to the threat of American shale oil, they do. However, the Saudi oil and the oil in Africa is always cheaper than Russia. So remember that fact. Russian oil is a lot more expensive than $10 or $20 a barrel. So the Saudi oil and African oil is always cheaper. So what Saudis tried to do, so Russia joined in OPEC and they realized, look, we need to be part of this cartel to fight against the American shale oil threat. And Russia remained as part of OPEC for a number of years. However, what Saudi Arabia then did is they tried to move into the European oil and gas market, which is basically Russia considered its own domain. So Russia, right next to Europe, they believe it's their traditional domain. They should be supplying oil and gas. So Saudi Arabia tried to move into this market, which made Russia, upset. So instead of actually supporting the Saudi cause to actually try to hurt the shale oil a little bit, what the Russians did is they broke away and they basically came up with their own independent oil regiment, which angered the Saudis even more. So what the Saudis did is they slashed the price of oil. So today, on Monday, the 9th of March, The world markets are in an absolute chaos. The reason being is the Saudis have completely slashed the price of oil. The Russians are doing their own thing, and the American shale oil is going to hurt. Now, the losses of this is in hundreds of millions of dollars a day. But what these countries believe, Russia, what they've done is they've strategically built up their reserves of oil, and they believe that they can take this pounding just to destroy the American market. The Saudis believe that shale oil is such a threat. The Saudis also believe that their oil is cheaper anyway. So they said, even if the losses that we take, right, we can take that losses to destroy the U.S. Shale oil market. So as far as countries which so if you don't live in America, you live in Europe or you live in some other countries and so on and so forth. For a while, if I mean, remember in 2014 they tried to do this and then they reversed because they couldn't take the pain. This time, let's see how long they can carry on. How many losses can they take? Because when the oil is cheap, it's good for the consumers. It's good for countries. If you live in Europe and so on, which have no axe to grind in this whole thing, you get cheap oil. However, this at some point, it's going to make America really, really angry because of what the Russians and the Saudis and OPEC in general are doing. What the Saudis are doing, so because of coronavirus, they've seen an opportunity, so they're purging the House of Saud. MBS is lining up the right people, and he is declaring an oil war on America. Last time, this thing in 2014 didn't last for long. U.S. delegation, Hillary Clinton and everybody else flew to Saudi Arabia, threatened them, and so on, so made them back off. Right now, let's see what happens because America has its hands full this year. You've got coronavirus, you've got economy tanking, you've got elections coming up. Let's see how this goes. And inshallah, I'll see you in the next presentation. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.